Too often, just in an effort to avoid conflict and stay comfortable, we can avoid saying what needs to be said. It doesn't have to be that way. I talk about this in my book, Let Go of the Guilt, particularly as I'm talking about people who deal with guilt trippers. And so I talk about what it looks like to just have the hard conversation. And here's what I say. We can catastrophize about the direction a hard conversation is going to take. We play an entire movie in our heads about the negative consequences of telling the truth, of asking for what we need and want, and hurting someone's feelings. These are the thoughts that are going through our heads oftentimes. But it's just as important to focus on what could go right. In other words, when you need to have a hard conversation, you must bring the skill of thought awareness to bear. Rather than shutting thoughts down, explore them, acknowledge them, and then make a strategy to move forward despite them. Okay? So I want you to think about a conversation it's time for you to have. Perhaps it's a boundary that needs to be set, something that's just taking you out of your comfort zone. And as a result, you've been avoiding it. And here are the questions I want you to ask yourself, just to coach yourself through this process. It's possible, but you got to get quiet, ask yourself some questions, and push through on your answers, okay? So the first one is, what am I afraid will happen if I have this conversation? A lot of times we don't really think through, what am I afraid will happen? And we have to follow up our answer with this question. How would I handle it if that happened? So a lot of times we come up with this, like I said, this movie in our heads of how awful it's going to go, but we never go a step further to say, okay, and if that happened, then what? Okay? Ask yourself that. Next, what are all the benefits of you having the conversation? You've got to focus on what happens on the other side of it. The freedom you're going to feel, the lack of irritation anymore because you have really set a boundary and you're changing what you're having to deal with on an everyday or an every week basis. So being able to say, what are the benefits of having the conversation? Because I guarantee you those benefits are going to outweigh any discomfort, especially because a lot of times the discomfort doesn't last very long. It becomes your new normal when you set a boundary. All right, next, what do I want to happen as a result of the conversation? So rather than focusing on what the problem is, what your frustration is, you start focusing on, what do I want to see different? What would I like to happen as a result of the conversation? This gives you hope. It gives you a vision for what you want on the other side of the conversation, okay? What specifically do you need to say? This is the planning. And a lot of times what you need to say isn't even that long. In fact, you could write it down. You can read it if you need to, right? If it's like, gosh, I want to say this right, so I've written it down. Here's what I need to say. You can do that in the conversation if it comes to that. But you have to get clear about specifically what you want to say. What are you asking for? What change needs to happen? What is it that you need to get out that makes this conversation so hard? Okay? And then next, what am I most afraid of saying and why? What are you afraid to say? That something's not working for you? That a behavior's not okay? That something is going to change that the other person doesn't like? Why are you afraid of that? Really dig, because oftentimes we find that what is getting in the way and the fear that's getting in the way isn't even about that person or that situation. It's based on things from the past, and this is an opportunity to overcome those fears and act with courage. All right, next. What if I began the conversation by describing my fear or anxiety and then explain that despite my fear or anxiety, I'm having this conversation because it's so important? In other words, rather than just pretending that this isn't hard for you, just say it's hard. This is a hard conversation for me to have. It conjures up a lot of anxiety because I don't want to upset you, or you're important to me, or I don't want to hurt your feelings, or I don't want you to misunderstand me. However, it's important to me to be honest. It's important to me that we have an honest relationship. Or I simply can't go without saying it anymore. So even though I'm afraid to say it, here goes. It really is okay to open up the conversation stating that it's a hard conversation. That actually gets some of that energy out for you, and it helps them to see the significance of the conversation. The key here is mustering up the courage to get out of your comfort zone. You can have the hard conversation. It's a decision. And it's a decision you won't regret because you'll know fear isn't controlling you. Instead, you have enough courage to get out of your comfort zone and do what needs to be done.